sharing deal with the Greens. And finally, more human remains have been found in 2 locations in Greater Manchester, weeks after the discovery of a torso in a Salford nature reserve. The new body parts were found by officers at Blackleach Reservoir and a dog walker at Linnyshaw Colliery Wood, both in Salford. Police say they believe the victim was a man in his 60s. 2 men were arrested on suspicion of murder on Thursday, and they remain in custody. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, it's our headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your in-depth look at Monday's newspapers in the company of 3 top comedians. I'm Stephen Allen, joined tonight by 2 big names in comedy and even bigger names in the Ofcom wall chart, Leo Kearse and Lewis Schaefer. You're giving yourself a round of applause.
I have to do it. I don't feel like it. I'm on a losing streak right now.
It's not a quiz show.
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry, there's no chance of walking away with a speedboat at the end of this. Have you ever wondered why you've been on so many times and never won anything? No wonder you look depressed.
Won anything? They've paid me to be on this show. I've won. This is the high point of my. See, the problem with you is you were bigger when you were younger, and this is the highest.
Wow.
But no, but I'm saying this is. I am in the glory days of my thing.
Right.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Right, let's take a look at the front pages. We start with the Daily Mail. They go with tens of thousands exploiting hidden asylum loophole. To the Telegraph, UK attacks EU double standards on migrants. The Guardian, the Home Office to detain UK asylum seekers in shock Rwanda move. The Times says depressed and anxious face losing their benefits. Going to make it worse, isn't it? And the iNews says Sunak to resist early election as Tory rebels on manoeuvres. And finally, the Daily Star, Oompa Oompa, take off the jumpers. And those are your front pages. All right, let's get into Monday's Telegraph, Leo. What have they got?
So they lead with the government has accused the EU of double standards on migrants after Ireland, which is in the EU, vowed to send asylum seekers to the UK, despite France refusing to take Channel migrants back. So this is basically since the Rwanda plan finally looks like it's actually going to take off. Migrants have been, or asylum seekers, or economic migrants, illegal migrants, whatever, have been leaving the UK and going to Ireland because they see that as a safer place. But that's caused all sorts of problems in Ireland because they don't have the infrastructure. We don't either. But we're a bigger country. So Ireland's saying, well, we're going to. Senior Irish ministers have said, well, we're going to change the laws so we can send them back to the UK. And the UK is saying, well, we can't send them back to France, so why should you be able to send them back to us? And they're basically saying they're going to dig their heels in and not accept any returns.
It does also make you think we had the ability to send migrants back when we were in the EU.
Oh, here we go again. No, Steve, you've got to get over it. It's been 8 years. You lost. Just accept it.
Me personally, I lost. No, but I mean, this is what it means, isn't it? We actually could have. So the reason they can't send migrants back to the UK at the moment is because we're not in the EU. If we were, then that's part of the deal that everyone had signed up to. And it is funny. The reason they can't send them back to the UK at the moment is because legally we're not viewed as a safe country by them. Come on, that's funny.
I don't view Britain as a safe country either. I'm trying to get out of here before I get stabbed.
Yeah, I mean, Lewis, has any of this made you want to go to Ireland instead?
Well, I mean, what it makes me think of is, why don't we just...
Makes you think that?
Yeah, it makes me think, why don't we just shoot somebody? That's all that needs to be done in these things. I don't believe in that, really. But that's basically what should be done, is we just need to...
well, they do that. I'm not advocating for that at all. I think it's a horrible.
Who does that? They don't do that.
Thing, but Saudi Arabia did that. A bunch of, I think they were Eritreans or Ethiopians crossed into Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure where from. So the Saudi Arabian border guards just pulled out machine guns and
Every
shot them.
country in the world does that. That's called a border.
No, I'm pretty sure it's just Saudi Arabia and a
They've
few.
got guys with guns on every border to possibly shoot. And so I'm not saying it needs to be done, but that's what needs to be done.
Well, that's the thing. Our asylum system and our asylum rules are built for a completely different time and a completely different people. Now we've got mass travel and we've got social media. So, pictures of 4-star hotels and people counting cash and whatever are getting beamed back to everywhere in the world. So everybody's like, I want to come to Britain. It looks better. They've got stable democracy and all this stuff that we don't have in wherever we are. And I mean, the trouble is, there's only a certain amount of migration you can sort of deal with, especially if it's people who aren't culturally assimilable. I mean, if it was
Not
French people coming, that'd be easier.
just as bad.
It's not even
still be bad.
It's not even a certain amount. Just 1, 2. Then they get in the thing, and oh my God, this guy's.
But you're one of them.
You're right.
There's only
One is too much, Leo. That's a very good point. Well made. Do you not think there's also this is all pointless because if they do bring in a law and they'll vote to say that the UK is a safe country and then they'll be able to remove people to the UK, they'll just go straight back through again because it's not like there's a border.
Yeah.
As long as they get a ferry into Northern Ireland again, they just walk through.
Maybe this is just like a gap year for Eritreans. They get to do the full circuit tour of Europe, and at each point, the Home Office in whatever country is moving you on, so you're not even having to pay for a ticket. Because they're actually saying if Ireland sends them back over, they're going to get sent back. So this is if you love spending time on ferries, this is probably a great time for you.
Good stuff. Well, let's go to the Times. What are they leading with, Lewis?
Depressed and anxious. Face losing their benefit. That's me. I'm feeling a bit down and out. Tories plan welfare reform as election divide. It's basically, and this is we did something the other week with another one of these stories about 9.5 people who aren't working and they just million. And the truth is that there's going to be an election coming up, and I guess the Tories are trying to show that because the stories that they actually care about, the Tories supposedly they haven't been able to do anything about. So let's work on something that they haven't been able to.
But this is more than electioneering because I mean the country, our economy is like really facing. I mean this is why there's economists say, well, we need mass migration to replace the people who aren't working here. But if we could just somehow get the people here to get off the couch and stop being lazy. The trouble is, if you pay people to sit on the couch, I've got friends who do it. I've got friends who could work, but are all like, oh no, I've got ADHD, I've got whatever thing you can just basically turn up and get diagnosed with. You know what I mean? I'm not saying ADHD isn't doesn't exist or anything, but I'm saying everybody I know has it, and I've got it, and we could all go in the sick if we wanted.
Well, it exists if you're willing to pay people money for it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. This is one of those things. The election's coming. I never paid attention to that many elections in the past, and I'm lucky I haven't paid attention because this is not going to help.
You're not going for that political correspondent job.
No, I don't want to do it.
At the risk of being sensible and ruining the fun for everyone, whilst Mel Stride is right in saying there are some things that are just the ups and downs of life that are being medicalised, that doesn't mean that absolutely everyone who's going to fall foul of this system is just one of those people. So there are some people who will suddenly find themselves without access to their medication when they need it, or being forced to work when they can't.
No, they can still have their medication, but they can just eat it on the bus to work.
Just to, have a double dose and get through 4 days' work.
We're all struggling. Yeah. We're all struggling under the weight of, existential dread. Well, we just get on with it. Like if you go to third world countries, if there are any left anymore, everybody's becoming middle class. But if you go to places like India or whatever, people aren't sitting about being like, oh no, I can't do any work because they don't have a welfare system. Maybe they do now. I don't know. But you don't. Was
your research watching Slumdog Millionaire?
I just make it up.
Yeah.
I just made it all up in my head.
Fair enough. Moving on now to we've given you The Guardian, Leo. Does it burn when you touch it?
Well, luckily, this is just a photocopy,
that's all right,
which I urge everybody to photocopy The Guardian and not pay for it. But yeah, basically, they've got a nice picture of Nicole Kidman because The Guardian objectifies women to sell more copies. And also, they've got an interesting story about Thames Water. So senior Whitehall officials fear that Thames Water's financial collapse could trigger a rise in government borrowing costs not seen since the chaos of the Liz Truss mini-budget. So there's urges to renationalise Thames Water, but it's got £15 billion worth of debt, which would then have to be moved onto the government's balance sheet. I just £15 billion worth of debt. How do you lose money selling water? Like everybody uses water. You use it. I drink it. I make tea out of it. I wash my armpits with it. Every part of my life involves water. I put it on my plants. so they can live. You know, water is just, you know, I use it all the time. I pour it on my car with some soap to clean it. So we're all using water. You've got to use the water that comes out of the tap that Thames Water give you, because you can't, like, run a hose pipe from Reading. So, yeah.
That's probably still Thames Water as well, isn't it?
It probably still is, yeah.
Because they're using Victorian water pipes. That's it. You know, you leave out the most important thing. It's the Victorian. Everything is Victorian water pipes.
Well, so it's great pipes then.
They're old pipes. They need to be fixed. The point is that somebody made some money off of this, and because they gave it to a private company to handle it instead of having the government handle it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The important thing is that people have walked away with profit whilst leaving the company 15 billion in debt, and now there's nothing you can do about it. Like, they serve as our own poops back into our water, and if you think, well, you know what, I hope they go under. And then we'd somehow get a worse mortgage from it. Yeah. So there is no way to get revenge on these people. That's the annoying thing.
It's like the financial crash all over again.
Yeah, they're too big to fail because they're big water.
Yeah, but 15 billion pounds, that's insane. Is there can't they claw back any money from at least from the, you know, chief execs or whatever?
Yeah, well, no, but because they'll just swan off with the money because they're allowed to. Not that you can be a swan anymore because you probably
But you know what? It's 15 billion. That doesn't even sound like a lot of money nowadays.
Well, I don't know how much you get paid at this show, but it's certainly more than I'm getting these days.
Well, because you didn't ask for much because you're English.
And finally, what's the Daily Star going with, Lewis?
The Daily Star, which is actually an amazing paper. From the cover, I wouldn't want to read it, but you open it up. There's a copy outside, and it's just so brilliant. It says, "Oompa Oompa, take off the jumpers. 21 degrees Celsius plume from Germany." It's just some warm weather from Germany, but it didn't just come from Germany. It came from somewhere else. but it doesn't work that way.
We can send it back legally.
It says it's going to be warm because it's 21 degrees in Germany.
Yeah.
But 21 degrees is only 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it's not warm.
It's not warm.
But it's been very cold. Cold.
It has been cold. I was just in Folkestone.
Yeah.
And Hythe, and it was really friends to people who saw me down there.
Right.
And it was cold.
Good anecdote. I mean, not the one we were hoping for, but still, nevertheless, we'll take it. We'll go. I mean, Leo, anything to add to a weather story? They're always the trickiest ones, aren't they? Oh.
Well, yeah, it's been cold, and now it's going to be a bit warmer, so that's nice. And also, I went to Germany once, and it was warm.
Yeah.
So it must be true.
Yeah, so they're not lying when they say this.
Fair enough.
I believe it could have happened.
Well, because it's continental climate. That's what it is in Germany. It's part of it's in the inside. It's not like here, which is close to the water, which gets cold and rainy.
Yeah.
And it's, I think summertime is coming too, I think. I haven't checked my calendar.
Britain's very damp.
I think I preferred the Folkestone anecdote.
Yeah.
It's weird, that one. Now I look back on it, it was a
Well,
highlight.
it was really lovely in Folkestone yesterday for about 3-4 hours in the morning, and then it turned horrible.
My fault for bringing it back up. I do apologise. That's the front pages sorted. Coming up, there's one thing that could keep Humza Yousaf in a job, and is Zelensky becoming the new Lord Kitchener? Find out more next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A man who worked for Sainsbury's for 20 years was sacked because he didn't pay for a few bags for life. Niamke Dofu put his shopping through a self-service checkout after his night shift, and CCTV showed him choosing the zero bags used option, and he was fired for gross misconduct. Well, join me now to discuss this. In our studio is the lawyer and broadcaster and great friend of the show, Andrew Eborn. Andrew, welcome to the studio.
Join you, Martin.
Certainly is. Now, on the one hand,
yes,
he was caught banged to rights on CCTV. It looked like, and the tribunal agreed, he stole the bags, but a 20-year career dashed on the rocks over 60p?
Yeah, I mean, the headlines are horrendous, aren't they? You sort of turn around on that sort of basis. So basically, there must be a valid reason for dismissing an employee, and you have to follow due process and so on and so forth. So they can look at about capability or conduct. And there has to be appropriate procedures set in place under employment law to afford that sort of protection. What they say, however, if there's gross misconduct, you can be dismissed instantly.
Yeah.
Now, gross misconduct includes criminal offence like theft. And the reality is, in the law, if you take property, whatever its value, with the intent of permanently depriving the person of it, then that is theft. And so what they did, they looked at the CCTV footage, and the Employment Tribunal had a look at this sort of stuff, and the guy wasn't just pressed no bags, he went backwards and forwards and so on and so forth. So he knew he was getting bags, And what they're sort of turning, I always sort of trust comes in on foot, but leaves on horseback. And so what Sainsbury's are saying in their defence is, hang on, we lost trust in the guy, even though 20 years and so on and so forth. We need to make sure we have trust in our employees.
Do you think they've thrown the book at him, thrown the bag at him, to make all of us worry about us being watched by CCTV? Is this fella a scapegoat?
Oh, I think without doubt it's a story and a warning for everybody.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections,
we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Stephen Allen here with Leo Kirsten, Lewis Schaefer, and we go to the newspaper. Leo, just under half of voters want an early general election, so the headline could read, just over half of voters enjoy watching Rishi Sunak suffer.
Yeah, well, I think more than half of voters enjoy that. But yeah, half of voters want an early election as Rishi Sunak refuses to rule out a July vote. So they've done this poll that shows that 47% of the public would like the elections to be held before the autumn. And interestingly, if you dig into it, you'd think maybe the Tories, wouldn't want a vote because they know that the Tories are going to get voted out. A third of Tories are like, yeah, I'm sick of these Tories, get them out. So, but I can kind of understand that, being a right-leaning person myself. I'd rather either have, proper Tories, or at least, somebody like Labour don't say that they're Tories and then act like Labour, like the Tories do. But anyway, so this comes as ex-Health Minister Dan Poulter announced on Saturday he was defecting from the Tories to Labour, and he urged Mr Sunak to call a general election as soon as possible. And I think Dan Poulter, he's all like, oh, I'm doing this because I'm so principled. No, you're doing it because you want a job after, at the end of the year. Like, he's saying, oh, I can't look my constituents in the eye. No, you don't want to look people in the eye down at the job centre. You know you're going to lose your job as a Tory, so...
Well, although, to be fair, he said he wasn't going to stand at the next election anyway, so he was never going to be a politician after the next election.
Oh, I was going to dump you anyway. That's what he said.
No, he'd already said it. I think there is, it's not like, oh, did no one notice when I mentioned this before? No, he'd already said it. Yeah. But the line where he said he couldn't look his patients in the eye, sorry, he couldn't look his fellow workers in the NHS in the eye. Yeah. Now? Do you not think that was trickier during the strikes? That would be the awkward time, wouldn't it, when you're a Tory MP and your co-workers are on strike? But
how does this compare to the last time about this time, like 4 years ago, when they had the same kind of problems they're having now, or 8 years ago? I think there's always a time that they want elections. There's no comparison made whether it's more now than later.
Although famously Brenda from somewhere in the southwest, that clip with when she was told there's going to be another election when in 2017 was it, or the 2019 one, and she was another one? That one. So there was definitely been times when people didn't want elections, but I think the problem is now all we're doing is talking about elections without actually having the elections.
Yeah.
It's like Diet Coke. Give us the flipping actual business. Do you know?
And I think people realise that the Tories, they're doomed. They're trash. They're gone. And it's like they're like all the things that they're proposing that we have to say that they're proposing. People are going, it's not important.
Yeah, you might as well start proposing unicorns right now, because why not? It's just a laugh, isn't it? You ain't going to be around to have to deliver them. So
yeah, that's what Keir Starmer's doing.
Well, let's crack on to the Times, Lewis. And there's not much political news that will make Rishi Sunak feel good about his career chances, but he'll love reading about Humza Yousaf. Fill him in.
Yes, Alex Salmond names his price to keep Humza Yousaf in a job. And basically, Alex Salmond was the main guy before he was basically stabbed in the back by that horrible woman.
Nicola Sturgeon.
Nicola Sturgeon, and he's got a very big stick to beat Humza Yousaf with, which is one and they're not called MPs. What are they called? MSPs. He's got one, and he says, "Hey, you know, if you're nice to me, I'll let you the."
We'll support you and we'll prop up your... Because otherwise it would be a minority government. It's like 63, so they were being supported by the Greens, but then the Greens were like, oh my God, what, you're not going to transition children? You're not going to institute communism straight away? This is disgusting. Because, you know, Humza's policy is, you know, instituting communism and sterilising children on a 5-year timescale instead of doing it this week. So, yeah, the Greens have backed out. And, so he's desperate for this, the Alba party, which is essentially a sort of offshoot of the SNP. It's the old SNP, the continuity SNP, if you like. So Ash Regan is the one MSP they've got, and the only trouble is, like, she was in the leadership contest with Humza Yousaf, and Humza was very scathing of her, and you know, when she decided to quit the party over the gender ideology stuff, Humza was like, "It's no great loss," and that's what he sounds like, because he's Scottish as well. But it's interesting. Alba sort of they sort of focus on real issues that actually, you know, are good for people, like protecting hundreds of jobs at the Grangemouth oil refinery. So it's interesting to see politicians actually acting like politicians should, instead of, you know, chasing after some imaginary gender ideology.
Well, of course they're going to do that because they're not in power right now. I mean, if they were in power, they might do something about it. I mean, what I got is Alba is like a feminist. They're feminists. They're for women.
Well,
they're for women, and the other one is for trans.
Their leader's apparently not the best for women. All the sleepy cuddles.
Well, he likes women.
The court case found nothing was, for legal reasons, we should say, everything was disproved. But, yeah.
Well, wasn't it disproved? It was disproved.
Yeah.
Right. So take that back.
All right, I take that back.
But even if the two confidence votes somehow mean that we still end up with Humza Yousaf being in charge, it's the kind of thing that punctures you under the waterline, isn't it?
Yeah.
So even if you win the confidence vote, look how weak you are. And this is all about weakness. The bit of the story I've really enjoyed has been because they decided to get rid of the unattainable Green pledge, just because the numbers didn't add up.
Yeah.
The Greens said, well, we need to take a vote on whether we still want to partake in this agreement, and that was what made Humza Yousaf say, right, well, we're breaking. No, I'm not going to look weak and wait for you to decide. And he's never looked weaker. He's put himself in the weakest of positions.
Yeah, well, it surprised me because I thought the SNP was like huge, and they are huge in Scotland. That's your people, right? They are huge there, but they only have 63 out of the 129. They're less than half.
Yeah.
So it isn't like that they've got a vast majority.
And they probably won't, after the next election, they probably won't ever get that level again, unless they do a sequel to Braveheart.
Lewis, to the Express. And you thought getting a UK passport that still works in the EU was stressful these days. Ukraine says, hold my beer.
Yes, Zelensky sparks anger in Ukraine with blatantly illegal conscription drive. He's basically said, if you don't want to be in our army, you're not going to be part of the country, and we're not going to help you out. So you could, you know, when you leave, and you're not coming back. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah, and also trying to, you know, change the rules so if somebody's passport expires while they're outside the country, they have to get sent back.
Yeah.
And then sent to the front line.
Right. So they basically say, you got to fight with us or you're going to die.
Which is kind of fair. I mean, there's people fighting at the front line. There's men fighting and dying, and also they're having to fight longer. They're not getting put in rotation and coming back and, you know, just doing their however many months. They're having to stay there because they don't have the troops, because Zelensky was sort of wary of doing further waves of mobilization and lowering the age and things like that. Obviously, in Russia, they don't have any of these issues. You know, just some guy comes along in a van and, like, you know, bundles you in, and all of a sudden you've got a rifle pointed at you till you march towards the front line and get blown up by a Ukrainian drone. But, you know, Ukraine as a European country is a bit more, you know, they pay a bit more attention to human rights. What's interesting, though, is so Zaluzhny was in charge of the Ukrainian armed forces, and he was fired by Zelensky. But Zaluzhny was very, very popular with the army. He really, you know, cared for the army, you know, tried to make sure that, you know, he didn't risk lives unnecessarily, which, you know, there's accusations that Zelensky and the current leader, Syrsky, are a bit more cavalier with people's lives. So Zaluzhny, I think, if he's been sort of banished, he's now ambassador to the UK, but if he could get, you know, political will behind him, get an oligarch to sponsor him or whatever, he could really mount a serious challenge to Zelensky. And I think, you know, Ukrainian politics is starting to get more frayed as the war drags on.
What about the people who are in the Ukraine who are Russian speakers who don't want to listen to this guy. Maybe this is his attempt to keep those people out.
But a lot of people who were sympathetic to Russia, so Crimea and the Donbass had big Russian-speaking populations. I mean, there's still some sympathy to Russia. Obviously, there's a lot of ties between the two countries. But those people were really, the general sentiment was really turned by Putin's invasion, and they, although previously they were critical of any sort of Western leading EU facing movement in Ukraine, now that's sort of changed.
Yeah. All right, let's crack on to the eye now, Leo. The police have to cut back on how much they spend on forensics. So now, how are they going to solve all of those crimes that they investigate? What's that? I'm being told, they don't even turn up to the crime scene. What do they do then? Online. I need to delete some tweets.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. So police use of forensics has been slashed by 99% as awful crisis unfolds. Shame it wasn't 999%, because that would be 999. But anyway, so this forensic guy, he said I ran a lab between 2006 and 2017. We needed at least 6,000 hours for 4 full-time scientists. The current level of work is not even enough to employ one scientist. Apparently, Force is paid for less than 1,000 hours of fibre analysis per year between 2018 and 2020. So this is equivalent to just 30 hours for each of the forces, which is a tiny amount. He's saying it's a 99% drop. But technology could have moved on. We could have done it faster. Also, criminals don't wear sweaters anymore, so there's there's not the fibres. Yeah, exactly, because of global warming. So there aren't the fibres there to analyse. And also, like you point out, the police don't actually turn up and investigate crimes anymore, unless it's a tweet, unless you've retweeted a limerick that some person with blue hair and a nose ring thinks is transphobic. The police aren't coming to your house.
No, they're not coming to your house. And so this is like a non-story. Nobody gives...
Wait, before you say it's a non-story, this also includes DNA testing to prove people innocent that are sat in jail.
Yeah.
So it feels like less... I'm sure they wouldn't call it a non-story.
Why would you trust the police to do a DNA test on you?
But they're the only people who've got the evidence. They're the only people who've stored it.
You could have it done privately.
In fact, the police are using... so they abolished the sort of central forensic, the National Forensic Science Service, because it was costing too much money. And now they use... it's been farmed out to private operators and moved in-house. So it's another case of sort of cost-cutting ending up probably costing more money.
Yeah, including, was it some drugs test that actually don't test for drugs? Feels like that's money well spent. You could have definitely made a saving there. Well, that's that section sorted. In the next one, we'll be giving away vaccines and letting faith schools exclude more people. What could go wrong with either? Find out next.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to rather mixed weather conditions across the UK during the week ahead. Rain at times, but temperatures will also be on the rise. At the moment, low pressure's in charge, sitting out towards the east of the UK. This weather front bringing outbreaks of rain towards the northeast of the UK, coupled with fairly brisk winds too. And certainly as we head through the evening, a pretty wet end to the day across the far northeast of Scotland. And we do hold on to outbreaks of rain across the Northern Isles through the night. Elsewhere, there'll be some clear spells, but notice showers moving in from the west, starting to give way to some more persistent rain across the far west of the UK by the morning on Monday. Temperatures will turn quite chilly under the clear slots towards the north and east. We could see a touch of frost briefly, but elsewhere it's a relatively mild night. As we go into Monday, we'll see an east-west split, outbreaks of rain in the west, moving in across northern areas during the day too, whereas out towards the east and southeast we'll see the best of the dry and often fairly sunny weather. And in the sunshine, it will be warmer than in recent days, up to 16 or 17 degrees, held back a little bit towards the north and northwest with those showers at 12 or 13 Celsius. On Tuesday, we'll see further outbreaks of rain out towards the west. Again, some of that could be quite hefty in nature. Further east, there'll be some sunshine and just 1 or 2 showers, particularly across the east and southeast of England. And again, those temperatures will be a little bit higher still. Could see high teens in a few spots. It does stay quite changeable weather-wise for the rest of the week, but notice those temperatures hold up too. Could see 19 or 20 degrees in a few spots, certainly from Wednesday onwards. That's it from me. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections,
we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. Lewis, to the Telegraph, the World Health Organization would take British vaccines. So if you don't like the World Health Organization and you don't like vaccines, tricky one to pick a side. Let's watch you wriggle.
Yes. No, I picked a side. I'm against it. First of all, I don't take vaccines anymore. I took vaccines my entire life. I'm not interested. Britain would have to hand over 20% of vaccines under pandemic treatment. And this is... You know, they don't say it's the United Nations anymore, so it's going to be the World Health Organization, and they're saying that, according to this guy, David Bell is a physician, he's saying that what they want to do is they want all countries to be able to donate or give at lower prices 20% of all the vaccines, and this is just one more attempt by the world to destroy our Britain.
Leo?
Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the World Health Organization, they're desperately trying to cling on to the power and status and money that they had. Obviously, over the pandemic, when, you know, everybody was panicking, like, oh my God, there's virus, whatever, you know, like, so everybody was, they had all this money and power, and they want to keep the good times rolling. So they've, like, they're bringing in these treaties and all this sort of stuff to try and, you know, in the public sector, departments only ever get bigger. They never get smaller again when the issue goes away. And I think COVID has receded as an issue. It's, you know, it's not the issue it was.
I don't see people believing. I see some people. I think the number is like 25 or 30% of the people who actually believe in COVID, but the rest of the people don't really believe in it anymore. I mean, I didn't believe in it 4 years ago. I don't believe in it now. So there.
You also hate Team World, so you don't like the World Health Organization taking vaccines that you don't want away from us. Still, it's a difficult circle for you to square.
Well, it's not as difficult. Number one, I don't really believe in viruses. I don't believe in it. And I don't believe in vaccines, which make...
Do you believe in anything that begins with the letter V?
I knew a girl named Valerie, lovely girl I went to school with.
I don't believe a word.
Yeah.
Yeah, she went to another school.
I don't believe in atoms.
Really?
Never seen one?
Yeah.
I'm going to trust the United Nations telling me I've got atoms? I'm not in any atoms.
You know what? You're right not to believe in atoms. Atoms probably don't even exist. The idea
there we have it.
But you know what's interesting? They say that COVID-19, and this is a proper WHO medical officer, he says COVID-19 was barely a problem in sub-Saharan Africa. And it's like, yeah, wonder why that is, because they've got other stuff to worry about. You know what I mean?
No, the reason why it wasn't a problem is because it wasn't caused by things that make you sick.
No, that's like...
No, it's true.
You sent me videos about not believing in viruses, and even if a shred of it was true, the model of presuming viruses exist works with the evidence. So there's nothing that you've sent me. I've sat there and watched your YouTube videos on there not being viruses. Yeah. Now my algorithm's having a great old time.
No, those places in the middle of the world where it's nice and warm, they don't get sick. The reason they don't get sick is because they're not trapped indoors on a
They've got
no viruses.
other diseases. They've got other diseases to die from. They've got AIDS and malaria.
You just said they don't exist out there. So
but malaria...
They don't exist. No, they don't. They don't have whatever this thing is, COVID thing.
Leo, to the Telegraph, they're scrapping the cap on faith school admissions. Let's get kids even more siloed on religion, because that's going to go well, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So Gillian Keegan is going to axe the 50% rule on faith school admissions. This is ending a policy that forces faith schools to keep half of their places open for children of different religions. So then if you've got a good performing faith school, you know, people who aren't of that faith can send their kids to that school. So when the cap was introduced, it was argued that it would stop the proliferation of hardline religious schools. However, ministers now think that hardline religious schools are a good thing and want more of them. What we need is more Wahhabist madrasas funded by Saudi Arabia. We need more hardcore Mormon, Scientologist schools. You know what I mean? It's going to be fantastic. Well, they say that the cap had little impact and instead had the undesired effect of preventing Catholic schools from expanding. But faith schools are a pretty terrible idea. They indoctrinate kids when they're the most vulnerable, got the most pliable brains. So, I mean, on the one hand, you're not getting indoctrinated into gender ideology, but you're getting indoctrinated into, you know, whatever faith it is. And the oversight, I don't trust the oversight. You get these reports of faith schools, you know, teaching kids, you know, things that certainly wouldn't be taught in a normal state school about homosexuality or when you should stone a woman to death or, you know, that kind of thing.
That's the bit that makes you laugh. That's of all the things we've been doing.
I agree with what you're saying. It's the whole thing is ridiculous. What are we doing? What is the state sending people to faith schools? If they want our money, let them get. They can't have our money. Let them get their own money. Let them have their. It's our money. We're going to have our own schools. So why should we send some into a Catholic school or a Muslim school or whatever other kind of schools that there are?
Yeah, and also, why are state schools introducing their own religion of gender ideology and teaching that? Why don't we just have all ideologies just, you know, not around schools? Let the kids, you know, grow up not getting... Just teach them actual things and stuff. Teach them about atoms, vaccines, things that matter.
Changed your tune about atoms, haven't you? They do exist after all. Lewis, the Daily Mail, shocking footage of someone being racist, but, and it's a big but, she was being racist about white people, so crack on, you're golden.
Yeah, so it's shocking moment pro-Palestine protest that tells demonstrator, you're just a white person. We don't like white people at UCLA as protest continues to roil U.S. And this is more bad news in America. I remember this happening during the Vietnam War. You probably don't remember because we haven't had it. I don't know whether they had it 20 years ago, but every 20 years or 40 years they have a kind of a revolution that's happened, and now they're happening. Basically, people don't like Jews. I don't know what it is about the Jews, but...
maybe they saw the show.
They saw my show, didn't make him laugh, said he's supposed to be funny. He's not funny. But these demonstrations, they don't want anybody arrested because they might have to kick them out of the school that they're going with, and every person's paying £80,000 to go to school. That's what it is.
So
like
they basically
in America.
they've bought the ability to be anti-Semitic. Because some of the stuff they're chanting, like they're not just chanting stuff like from the river to the sea, which could arguably, you know, considering nobody knows which river and which sea, you know, it's just like a funny thing they're chanting. But they're chanting things like kill the Jews. That's pretty unarguably, regardless of context. I don't think even the Met Police could find a context in which that's not anti-Semitic. That's ridiculous. But the whole thing about this, you know, look at this anti-Semitism on campus now. The reason this is flourishing and the reason it's got to this point is because anti-whiteness has been celebrated and pushed as an ideology on university campuses and in popular media. You know, you've got critical race theory, and you can see, you know, even in the comedy industry, it's all like, move over, pale, stale males. And so it's great to see you both again. But yeah, they've been pushing this anti-whiteness, and because that went unchecked, nobody put their foot down and said, you know, the Martin Luther King thing of like, no, we're going to judge people based on the content of their character rather than the colour of their skin. Because it was allowed for whiteness, it's now being allowed for anti-Semitism.
Well, and that's the problem. Somebody asked me, why do people still hate the Jews? They hate the Jews because the Jews basically latch ourselves on to the side that's in power, and then people who are not in power go after that, and then Jews get knocked out, and then it happens again. It's we're doomed. We are doomed by these bunch of losers.
You're right about that depressed thing earlier on, weren't you?
Oh, my God, I'm in a bad way.
Leo, The Guardian, charities don't hire enough working-class people, apparently. Of course they don't. It would be a waste, because working-class people don't have dinner parties with quinoa when they can virtue signal about their jobs. Duh.
They probably do now in Britain in 2024. But yeah, so charities are hiring staff with privilege rather than potential, according to the author of a report highlighting the stark class divide in the charity charity sector. So working class people are less likely to be hired by charities, and also they're finding it harder to climb the career ladder inside charities, with the report highlighting how charity chief executives are twice as likely as the wider population to have gone to private school, rising to 3 times as likely for the biggest charities. But yeah, obviously, I mean, charities aren't meritocracies. They get given money by confused old people mostly, and you know they've got no incentive to get the best person, because their whole job is to spend money on stupid, useless people who can't get a job in a proper organisation. And also, all charities, and all of them are basically sort of beholden to social justice ideology. So, you know, working class people are less likely to believe in critical race theory and gender ideology. Number one, because, you know, critical race theory and gender ideology are completely idiotic. And number two, because working class people are too busy working to actually sit down and read The Guardian cover to cover and find out about these ridiculous ideas.
And they can't believe that that these charities, that there's big money involved, that they could make some money. They want to go to some kind of business that can make some money. And so they've been lied. So the poor working class people, you feel for them, that they've been lied to. They've been told that, you know, that there's money outside of charities, and the whole world is a charity.
But look, all the ties they give you.
I pay £2 for these ties. This is one of the ties. Yeah, I got this in Folkestone or Hythe.
Folkestone. Just the last section to go, and sit tight if you'd like to hear about a pub night out that could be very different with drugs and gay animal sex. That's 2 stories. I should have paused to make that obvious. 2 different stories. Find out details next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
We're now going to talk about Meghan and Harry. There was a polo match they took part in Miami, and we've got Angela Levin, royal correspondent here. So, what have you picked up from this this polo match?
Well, the interesting thing is that the polo thing that's going to be photographed and filmed for Netflix, this is Harry's one.
Yes.
But there was Meghan centre stage. And she stood there holding the treasurer.
Yes.
And actually, who she pushed around was a doctor, Dr. Sophie Chankuka, who's chair of Santabile, the charity that they're doing it for. And she was asked if she would take the trophy. And she said, yes, that's why she came, because the money from the polo match is going to this charity.
Huh.
And Meghan had to push her out of the way because she wanted to be in the middle. I've never heard such a disgusting, rude thing to do.
That at the end of the day, she's an actress. She knows how to take centre stage.
Yes, but this was bullying. You know,
Actual physical pushed her.
No, she didn't actually physically push her, but she wanted to go next to Harry because it was her charity. And so she bent down under the trophy and then went the other side of Meghan, and then she's all smiling. I mean, that turns my stomach, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody would know that that's not appropriate. Let Harry have a little thing of his own. He scored the goal that made them win, and you'd think she would be really pleased. He pecked his lips, he pecked her lips. It wasn't actually a great passionate kiss, as the paper said, because it didn't last more than a second. You know, she's crushed him to nothing.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria De Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. Leo, The Guardian. Should ads for gambling be allowed on the London Underground, as if it's not enough of a gamble to touch a handrail down there?
Yeah. So the online casino company 888.com will withdraw adverts from locations, including London's transport network, after a backlash prompting criticism of the capital's mayor Sadiq Khan for allowing them to appear in the first place. This is controversial because TfL, Transport for London, previously blocked adverts featuring things like artisanal cheese because apparently it's too high fat, and also a cake. That was a poster for a plate. It wasn't even advertising cakes. There was a poster for a plate that had a cake in it. Like,
it was a wedding theme as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it was on the money. It's not like a random cake cropped in for no good reason.
Yeah, exactly. But they're worried, and also Wimbledon tennis tournaments, strawberries and cream, which is healthy because it's got strawberries in it. It's certainly,
It's not healthy because it has strawberries, which are sugar-based, and it has cream in it. You can look at anything as not healthy. The point about this is they haven't been forced to do anything. They just said, well, we're not going to advertise it, which is a form of advertising. So suddenly this is in every single newspaper. It was a great publicity thing. I'm going to not advertise something. I'm going to not... and maybe people will pay more attention to me. This is just what's his name? Who's the mayor? Sadiq Khan. This is just Sadiq Khan wants to pretend like he's doing something, and he's not.
But it does seem really petty. And is the Tory rival for the mayor's election, which is coming up pretty soon, she's called Susan Hall. And I didn't know that until... No, I mean, I did know it. But I think it's, she doesn't get enough. Let's do a bit of advertising for her.
Well, she should refuse to advertise on London Underground, and then it'll be a story. We could talk about it.
She should put a picture of her holding a cake and a big thing of cheese on a poster on London Underground. Then that'll get banned. Then people will know who she is.
Famously, she can't get on the London Underground because she had her Oyster card nicked. Do you remember the story when she was complaining about the theft on London Underground? It's terrible. She lost an Oyster card and it was sent back to her because she dropped it on the tube. So if that's the worst crime you face, then maybe it's the least of your worries. I should also say, though, about the advertising cake. Wedding cake is particularly bad for you because it is the one that definitely makes some people fat. In as much as soon as they've eaten that one, give it a year or two.
Yeah.
So it seems to be...
There's a high correlation with...
Yeah. Lewis, the Metro. Gay sex developed in animals to keep the peace, which is handy information the next time you get a road rage incident.
Well, you know what? We don't know if this is true. Gay sex between animals evolved for a very important reason. And this is a study that was done about, a study. I guess it was a study. This guy, Jose Gomez. And he tracked every kind of interesting species who have kind of, homosexual type actions with each other, except the ones that matter, which is us, which is humans. And basically they have no idea why people... They don't. It said that it did, but they have no idea why animals... Basically, they said, why are they doing it?
Well, they say it happens more in animals where the animals kill each other, tend to kill each other. But then they say, you get gay penguins and gay albatrosses. How does that even work? They don't have, I don't think they've got penises.
Yeah.
So they rub their cloaca together. I want to see some footage.
Birds have penises, but they just have really small penises.
I don't think they do. I think they've got a unihole called a cloaca.
No, that's the cloaca's the... That's how they'll... that's where you poop from.
It's not where I poop from.
No, because you're not avian or a reptile, but they've...
I've been called a reptile.
Ducks famously have a corkscrew penis.
Yeah.
Right. And does it make that noise when you...
on the way out?
But they call it same-sex mating. And there's no mating going on, so how could it be same-sex mating?
Oh, yeah.
What is that called?
Well, it's mating, because it's two that you can mate.
No, it doesn't mate.
Well, if it's to keep the peace, they're mates afterwards. A bit of that, then go down the pub, and then all of a sudden, no fighting.
I don't think so. I think mating has to do with something happening.
Leo, the Daily Star. What would happen if pubs could sell alcohol and cannabis? I would stand a better chance at that pub quiz.
So the Brit pub sesh could change if people got high instead of drunk. Experts say, "Wow, I wonder how long you got to study to work that one out." They're looking at legalising cannabis in Britain. This is the state, the deep state, whoever you're talking about, Team World, want to legalise cannabis because it keeps people just compliant and dull-minded. So they want people smoking weed instead of doing more exciting, fun drugs. that cost more money. But basically what would happen to pubs is they'd play more Go a Trance in the jukebox, the curtains would smell, there'd be a lot more paranoia. I think it's ridiculous. And also they say, the alcohol is linked to so many bad things like eating kebabs and fueling antisocial behaviour like football hooliganism. I'm sorry, but football hooliganism, number one, it's like the one thing that makes football interesting. And number two, I think, it makes the state a little wary of the people when they see mobs, charging around. And, I think the state should be on its toes.
Right. I've never seen any football hooliganism.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, you don't think viruses exist. We've got less than a minute, but let's try and cover this, Lewis. The Daily Mail. More words we're banned from saying now includes don't say lame, say cheesy. I don't think you should call someone with one leg cheesy. How does that happen?
Yes, well, this is Visit Britain, which is part of the British government, I guess. They issued a 50-page inclusivity guide advising against words like blacklist, man hours, and blind spot. And they've spent their budget is £54 million, and they told everybody not to use any of these words because they sound funny.
Yeah.
It's like a Two Ronnie sketch where you can't say Manchester anymore.
Yeah.
It's got that level to it.
It literally is. So instead of saying man up, you've got to say brave, and instead of sanity check, you've got to say confidence check. I say instead of calling them Visit Britain, they should be called Don't Visit Britain. It's full of just nanny state idiots like this.
But it was just suggestions. I don't think they were actually going to force people to actually follow this.
Well, the show is nearly over, so let's crack on to take another look at Monday's front pages. The Daily Mail, tens of thousands exploiting hidden asylum loophole. The Telegraph, UK attacks EU double standards on migrants. The Guardian, Home Office to detain UK asylum seekers in shock Rwanda move. The Times says depressed and anxious face losing their benefit. And iNews, Sunak to resist early election as Tory rebels on manoeuvres. Finally, The Star says umpa, take off your jumpers, whatever that means. Those are your front pages. That's all we've got time for. Thank you to my guests tonight, Leo Kearse and Louis Schaefer. Simon Evans will be here tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Nick Dixon and Cressida Wetton. And if you are watching at 5 a.m, sit down, get yourself sorted and stay tuned for breakfast. Till the next time, have a good one.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to rather mixed weather conditions across the UK during the week ahead. Rain at times, but temperatures will also be on the rise. At the moment, low pressure's in charge, sitting out towards the east of the UK. This weather front bringing outbreaks of rain towards the northeast of the UK, coupled with fairly brisk winds too. And certainly as we head through the evening, a pretty wet end of the day across the far northeast of Scotland. And we do hold on to outbreaks of rain across the Northern Isles through the night. Elsewhere there'll be some clear spells, but notice showers moving in from the west, starting to give way to some more persistent rain across the far west of the UK by the morning on Monday. Temperatures will turn quite chilly under the clear slots towards the north and east. We could see a touch of frost briefly, but elsewhere it's a relatively mild night. As we go into Monday, we'll see an east-west split, outbreaks of rain in the west, moving in across northern areas during the day too, whereas out towards the east and southeast we'll see the best of the dry and often fairly sunny weather. And in the sunshine, it will be warmer than in recent days, up to 16 or 17 degrees, held back a little bit towards the north and northwest with those showers at 12 or 13 Celsius. On Tuesday, we'll see further outbreaks of rain out towards the west. Again, some of that could be quite hefty in nature. Further east, there'll be some sunshine and just one or two showers, particularly across the east and southeast of England. And again, those temperatures will be a little bit higher still. Could see high teens in a few spots. It does stay quite changeable weather-wise for the rest of the week, but notice those temperatures hold up too. Could see 19 or 20 degrees in a few spots, certainly from Wednesday onwards. That's it from me. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May,
The people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast.
With the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Our top stories this hour. The Shadow Health Secretary says Dr Dan Poulter has not been offered a peerage to defect from the Tory party to Labour. Wes Streeting is defending Dr Poulter's decision, saying it shows only Sir Keir Starmer can be trusted with the NHS. Dr Poulter says he'll sit on the Labour benches until the next general election and then stand down. Comes just days before local elections across England and Wales. And the Prime Minister this morning refused to rule out a general election in July, where Streeting says Dr Poulter defected to save the NHS.
There will be millions of people, disaffected Conservative voters like Dan Poulter out there, who can see the chaos in the Conservative Party, see the failure to deliver, and are looking at the alternative. And I'd ask those people to trust the doctor, who's seen the Conservative Party up close.
Well, that's the Labour view. Policing Minister Chris Philp is defending the government's handling of the NHS, pointing to record levels of spending.
Just in the last year alone, the NHS has grown by 68,000 staff, and there are today 7,000 more doctors and 21,000 more nurses than there were a year ago. And tens of thousands of people each year are fleeing the Welsh-run the Labour-run NHS in Wales to have treatment in England.
Former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick is calling for a cap on net migration, saying it's the only way to restore voters' trust. Mr Jenrick says he wants a far more restrictive system, allowing less than 100,000 people a year. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, he said the government's recently passed Rwanda bill will join the graveyard of policies that failed to tackle illegal migration.
Last 30 years, politicians of all stripes have promised controlled and reduced immigration, only to deliver the opposite. And the public are rightly furious at what's happened. It's placed immense strain on housing, on public services, on community cohesion.
Well, meanwhile, Labour says Rishi Sunak needs to wake up and realise that his migration plan isn't working. That's after Home Office figures show that more than 7,000 people have arrived illegally by small boats so far this year. Labour's Shadow Immigration Minister, Stephen Kinnock, says his party will crush the smuggling gangs and make sure that those with no right to be in the United Kingdom are swiftly returned. The Alba Party has been placed on an election footing as motions of no confidence in Scotland's First Minister make a general election there look increasingly likely. Their only MSP, Ash Regan, hasn't confirmed if she'll support Humza Yousaf, but it's thought that her vote could be crucial. Mr Yousaf is asking leaders of rival parties to find common ground after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens. Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code. It's on the right-hand side of your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now let's go to Free Speech Nation.
Students occupy buildings at Columbia University. Humza Yousaf is teetering on the brink, and the NHS says that it will use the word woman once more. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics. And of course, we'll have the latest from those culture warriors who claim to be on the right side of history and who will ruin your life and reputation in the name of compassion and love. Coming up on the show tonight, I'm going to be talking to two visiting speakers at King's College London who had to cancel their event due to death threats. And homophobia is making a comeback. I'm going to be joined by the author Gareth Roberts to talk about his new book, Gay Shame, the rise of gender ideology and the new homophobia. And we'll be discussing why all your favourite sitcoms are racist. Plus, you're going to see the moment when I met the world's oldest living land animal, Jonathan the tortoise, who is 192 years old. That's right, I'm going full David Attenborough tonight. And of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our lovely studio audience, and my comedian panellists this evening are Paul Cox and Nick Dixon. Welcome both. Sorry, I should have introduced you as your other names, the Big Dog and the People's Gammon.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't know who Paul Cox was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is in my contract.
It is.
When you said the oldest land mammal, I thought you meant Lewis Schaefer from it. It's a tortoise.
And Lewis Schaefer is going to be very upset because that tortoise only eats vegetables, and he claims that the only way to for longevity is to eat meat. Well, yes. He's wrong, isn't he?
But he also says that science. Go on. He also says that exercise is bad for you.
He does.
And tortoise does not exercise. And that water dehydrates you. Why are you making it about Lewis? Straight away.
It's not about him. He's not here tonight. A lot of the people watching won't even know who the hell we're talking about. So let's get some questions from the audience. We're going to start with our first question from Jill. Jill, hello. Hi.
Given his almost unbroken record of failure. Can Hamza Yousaf survive?
Did you call him Hamster Yousaf?
I nearly did. I'm sorry.
That's quite a nickname. I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it, Jill? Are you a fan of Hamza Yousaf at all?
No.
No, given that you don't know his name, I assume that's not. I mean, he hasn't had the best track record, has he? Let's be honest about it. No, and I think ultimately, Nick, it is the case now that he is clinging on. He's tenacious. You've got to give him that. But surely it's all over at this point.
I think so. Firstly, I want to know how long Hamster Yousaf can last, because like Liz Truss with the letters, I want to see a hamster to show how long Humza could last.
That's actually not a bad idea.
We know that tortoises last a long time, but how long is that hamster? It'll probably last less time than a hamster.
I think a hamster's, what, 2 years, 3 years max?
It'll probably last less time than a hamster in the hands of Lenny from Mice and Men. That's how long he's got.
Yeah, that's a good literary reference.
Thank you. I'm very clever. He's got very little time. I mean, because one thing that's not helping him is that Ash Regan may have the deciding vote, and he said about her that she was no great loss when she went to Alba. And those kind of things, I have heard the phrase, Andrew, about, I don't remember it quite correctly, but it's something to do with hell hath no fury, and I don't know the rest, but the point is, don't mess with Ash Regan.
Well, there's also revenge is a dish best served cold, which is a Klingon proverb, of course, so, you know, there's that as well. I mean, this is the thing, Ash Regan, of course, has been described as a TERF, left the SNP because of these disastrous gender recognition reform changes. So she's going to have the deciding vote.
Yeah, she's going to be toast. She's going to be king. He is toast. Ash Regan, by the way, her only ever crime was being a Christian and talking in tune with her faith. So all she really did was show that she had a moral backbone. And she would have been, I think, and I don't like the SNP, so I'm glad that she didn't become the leader. I think she would have made a great leader for the SNP, so I was quite glad she didn't.
So wait a minute, what about Humza Yousaf? Humza Yousaf is the problem here. He's now broken with the Greens. That entire accord
is toast. Absolutely, he is toast. The SNP are reaping exactly what they have sown now.
Yes.
And they are getting everything, they're plundering everything they were granted. Yeah, Scotland are going to get much they deserve much better, they're going to get much better. The one thing I would say to all the people that are calling for Hamza Yusuf, he's going to go. Don't call for it, just enjoy the show. Many of us have waited a long time for this to happen.
So this is tricky, Nick, because ultimately Scotland, the SNP seem to get away with an awful lot because of this groundswell of support for independence, which means that a lot of the Scottish people will tolerate all the nonsense about, you know, male rapists in women's jails. They'll tolerate the record levels of drug use and the nanny state nonsense about banning 2-for-1 pizzas and minimum pricing on alcohol. They don't mind any of that so long as they get independence. But actually, it looks like support for independence is going down because of the SNP.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, one possible theory or hypothesis is that someone like Kate Forbes gets in is actually better for independence because she's not completely incompetent and an idiot.
Yes.
And therefore, actually, it might be counterintuitive that we might want Hamza to stay if you really want Scotland to stay in. I, however, still want him to go, even if it means independence, just because I can't stand him that much. It's still worth it, especially after his white speech, where he went through and explained why he hated...
explain what that was?
Did everyone see the white speech? They all saw it. I'll explain for the people at home. He did a speech, famously, it's like a viral clip now, where he goes through all the positions of power in Scotland and how they're all white. Then he lists another thing and he goes, white, white, and he goes on for ages. Like, it's just venomous hatred of white people. So I put a post when I thought he was going. I was like, his eyes widening in shock as he realised it was over. White, the flag that he raised, but he left white. So there'll be loads of memes like this. Most people said the P45, but mine was better. But the point is, he hates white people, apparently. I don't know if we're legally allowed to say that,
remind me, how
just
many,
watching the speech...
What percentage of the Scottish population are white again?
It's something like 90-something%.
Yeah,
96.
96%. So that might explain...
It's a bold election-winning strategy, I've got to say.
Isn't it? To just alienate 97% of your electorate. It's a funny idea.
Yeah, by the way, when I was talking about Ash Regan, I meant Kate Forbes.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
See, I didn't want to say...
You should have done it. You should have saved me. The reason I've got to do this now is because there are a lot of people tweeting me. Kate Forbes. Ash Regan... it is absolutely fascinating that Ash Regan is now going to become kingmaker, potentially for Hamza Yusuf.
We'll find out, won't we? OK, we're going to move on to another question now, and this one is coming from Paul. Paul, hello.
Hi. In the NHS hospital of my choice, am I still going to be able to do my chest feeding?
Yes. Paul, your chest feeding, I know it means a lot to you, doesn't it?
Right, absolutely, yeah. I was enjoying the hamster Yusuf, but the chest feeding is...
This is actually quite a big deal because we now have Victoria Atkins, who's the Health Secretary. She's saying that she's going to announce this series of changes because we all know that over the past few years the NHS has started using strange words like chest feeder or, birthing parent instead of mother. They don't want to use the word woman, so they say people with ovaries and quite a lot of sort of demented, misogynistic, frankly, phrases to avoid saying words like woman. Well, since the Cass review, things are slightly shifting, aren't they? Nick, I want to ask you about this because if the NHS they're making a good start. Let's stop referring to chest feeders, which sound like some kind of alien species anyway, and they're going to start using words like woman again. So is this because of the Cass review? Is that why? Is this going to sort itself out eventually, finally?
Seems that way, Andrew, and it's a huge achievement after 14 years of Conservative government that we finally get back to something like normal and admitting that women exist again. This is where we are. We're hailing this as a great victory, that our National Health Service is admitting that women are real. I thought I was a misogynist till I came across the NHS. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's a victory, but you sort of step back and go, it's insane that this is a victory. But I do think it's good. I do think it's changing. I think the gender thing's over. It'll take a while to dissipate, but we basically won. The Cass review, as you say, etc. All these things are happening. It's over for the gender thing. It'll just take a while to fully... I
don't think we should be complacent, by the way.
Not complacent, but another thing is going to come along. That's what I was going to say as well. Look how that COVID comes along. Another nonsense cult will come along. Not that COVID was entirely a cult, but you know what I mean? The hysterical... That sounds terrible now. The hysterical elements of it. You know what I mean, but Ofcom don't. The point is... something else will come along. I'm worried it's going to be euthanasia, because that's the big thing. Starmer's obsessed with euthanasia, and people think, oh, yeah, it's caring, which we were told with COVID and things like that. But actually, if you look at the stats in Canada, it's going to be an absolute disaster.
Yeah, some horrific stories about really young people, perfectly physically healthy, who are depressed, being told by their doctors, well, it's not going to get any better. You may as well kill yourself.
And in Scotland, a 16-year-old, they're saying 16-year-old anorexics could possibly do that through a new loophole in a bill. There are things like this, so you've got to be very careful. There's another thing coming around the corner after this gender madness. You've got to be alert.
And it's also worth remembering, isn't it? Because people often misunderstand the culture war as being left versus right, and they've completely got that completely wrong. And the reason we know this is because most of the worst, most egregious elements of the culture war over the past 15 years have come about because of the Tory government. It's the Tories that have allowed this to happen. So it's just not true, is it? Now, finally, at the end of their tenure, the Tories step in and say, actually, we're going to deal with this institutional misogyny that we've embedded into the NHS. Too little, too late?
Yes. I mean, it's not going to save them, if that's the question. The Tories are toast.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely toast. And we're going to get a Labour government sometime before the end of January 2025.
It may very well make all this worse, although Wes Streeting has said they are committed to the findings of the Cass review, right? So
I think the Cass review changed everything.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I know you do, Andrew, and, you know, and people like you have championed the Cass review, and it's just not found its way into the mainstream media. So there will be people out there that maybe are tuning in for the first time to GB News who really don't understand what the Cass review does. But it essentially stops child mutilation, OK? Because what it's done is it said there is no positive benefit for it. And what that's meant is it's starting to re-change the way we talk about this. I've always been fascinated by the fact that women in particular have spent a lot of their time over history, particularly in the last 100 years, fighting for their space in this world. And the minute they get some ground, we start referring to them as chest feeders and owners of ovaries.
Yeah.
So it's just been completely retrograded.
It's really interesting, though, that you mentioned this about the Cass review, because it's all very well saying, OK, the NHS is going to stop using the lexicon of activists in their literature. But on the other hand, if you go on the NHS website, they're still talking about gender identity. And the concept of gender identity is the equivalent of a soul. It is a fundamentally religious belief. And their wording is lifted straight from Stonewall, who, as far as I'm concerned, are completely discredited and are now effectively a charity that works against the interests of gay people, even though it once was for gay people. So how do we deal with that? Like, how do we get... You know, you're right that I think the Cass review ultimately will have a knock-on effect, but they're still using the language, the magical language of gender identity, the idea that we have a misaligned soul and body, and that's what's caused all the problem.
Yeah, just want to pick you on one earlier thing. The Tories presiding over a lot of this doesn't mean that it's not a left-wing phenomenon, because of course they're a far-left party. So I have to point that out. Although I agree with you. I agree with you. Woke and left are not synonymous. There's lots of smart people on the left, like you, many other people we know, but they're the thick ones who go along with wokeness. But there's
a lot of right-wingers go along with it. That's the problem. There really is.
Is there?
Yeah,
maybe,
there are.
maybe.
There are. I mean, not as many. I admit to you that the Conservatives are not as captured as Labour, but we've seen a lot of people. Alicia Kearns, for instance, Conservative MP, wants to put an amendment to the criminal justice bill.
She's just in the Conservative Party, which is a left-wing party.
Okay.
I mean, I know you might think that's a get-out clause, but clearly the Tories and Labour are both two extremely left-wing parties. But
well, anyway, wait a minute, Theresa May, I mean, she was the one who was responsible largely for the reforms to the gender recognition.
She's another lefty. They're all the same. There's only about 5 Conservative people in the Conservative Party, like at the back somewhere, and they're being told to shut up.
You shouldn't know with Theresa May, because she dresses too well to be on the right.
They're all fakes. But why do you think the party's destroyed them? We've got, you know, Reform and other ones. Anyway, but on your other question, it is bizarre, isn't it? You talk about this sexed soul, I believe is the phrase. It is a metaphysical belief, ultimately, that you were born somehow in the wrong body. And one thing that's particularly egregious is the accepting with children saying that to you, when obviously a child will do what it can to fit in with the social mores of the time. That's how they're adapted. That's completely normal. You don't listen to them. You know, people have said this a lot. Oh, it's a phase. My child thinks he's a dragon. It's a phase. There's the phase argument, but there's also the argument they will do things to appease adults, so you don't listen to the child. Right. It's obscene.
Absolutely. And by the way, I think people should be allowed their metaphysical beliefs. I think if you believe in a sexed soul and you believe that your body's misaligned, fine. But I don't think you should operate on children or put them on drugs because of that metaphysical belief that they cannot possibly understand or hold. Anyway, let's get another question now. This one's from John. Where is John? Hi.
Good evening. My question is a change question. Can Tory MPs change into socialists overnight?
I mean, this is very magical thinking as well, isn't it? So this, I presume, is Dan Poulter.
Indeed,
Dan Poulter, who has defected to Labour. Do you have any... My understanding is he's done this because he thinks the Tories have failed on the NHS. Do you think that's it, or is he just running because he knows that he's on the losing team at the moment? What do you think?
I wonder whether he's running because he's on the losing team. But it begs a bigger question about other Tories, and as you say, how left-wing they are, and what other parties they might change to.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of reminiscent. Do you remember Change UK?
Yes.
Do you remember that? Where all those people just sort of ran over to this imaginary party, and then they all just, well, then the imaginary party died in the 2019 election because nobody voted for them. And
It's Dan Poulter, isn't it?
Yes.
I just don't... when I see anything like this, I think, what do his constituents think? The people that elected him in the first place, who voted it in a local Conservative MP, and now he's gone, well, I'm not that anymore, I'm this. And I truly believe that it's because he sees that he's got a burgeoning political career that's about to turn to toast, and he's trying to find a way to keep it going.
Yes, but it does lend credence to Nick's argument that actually, effectively, there is no real difference between the Tories and Labour. Do you think that's right?
That is right, and because it's my point. And I've sort of used up my point on this already. Dan Poulter described the Tories as a nationalist party of the right, where everything about that sentence is completely false. Maybe "of" is correct, but it's or "the." But they're not nationalists. I've already said they're not on the right. I think we've shown that, but they're not nationalists either. I mean, Rishi is the ultimate globalist. Everything about him screams globalism. OK, he was pro-Brexit because he thought that was the winning side. That's about the only thing vaguely nationalist about him. The Tories, you can look at any metric, immigration, their obsession with diversity, with Cameron's A-list onwards. You can look at...
that's what I mean about the woke policies.
You can look at any number of policies, but they're not a nationalist party of the right. So maybe he moved for cynical reasons because they're about to lose. I don't know. He said it was due to their lack of funding for the NHS, and therefore you say that the Tories have not properly funded the NHS. My question is, the NHS is a Labour idea in origin. Isn't it just flawed at its conception?
That's a much bigger question,
Well, because there's never been enough funding for it. It's never enough.
No, I think there should be more, but...
it's a black hole.
But anyway, we haven't got time for that because we've got one final question from Mary. Hi.
Is Terry and June offensive?
Have you seen Terry and June, Mary?
I haven't. I wasn't even born when the series started. So.
That doesn't mean you can't watch it.
I will start watching them then.
Well, you should. It's on BritBox, but BritBox, of course, have put this trigger warning on Terry and June, which you all know is the June Whitfield and Terry Scott sitcom of the late 1970s and early 1980s. The most inoffensive, I think, sitcom that could be imagined. But they have put a trigger warning saying it contains discriminatory language of its time. But of course it has language of its time.
Yeah.
What other language would it have? I mean, how would this work?
It's like these people still need their mums to wipe their bums. I don't understand how you can become an adult and watch something and be offended by... You know, don't watch it for a start.
Yeah, there's that, isn't there?
But this programme is just inane. It's relative. It's kind of funny. It's of its time. There was a scene where the boss of one of the main characters was kind of against homosexuality. Well, it was 1977.
Yeah, but everyone was.
Yeah, that was the fashion, Andrew.
It was the fashion. Some people still are, Nick.
Simpler times. Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be more absurd. You thought sort of Hello, Hello or Fawlty Towers was the zenith or the apotheosis of this absurdity. I'd say it's Terry and June being offensive is so discriminatory language of the period. As you say, of course it does. That was the period. Just like when we watch things from 2024, a few years from now, you'll be like, why did they all hate white people and thought that men could be women? It'll look absurd.
It'll be like that, exactly.
Because it'll be the discriminatory language of the period. So of course it is.
You know, we just know, don't we? We don't need to be patronised like this by being warned about
It's this year zero ideology, you know, the past must be erased and everything must be in line with our current prevailing ideology. Insane.
So weird. And one of the people who's often a panellist on this show, Scott Capurro, who's a stand-up, he's just had the police called on him for a show that he did in London. I'm not kidding. The police turned up to let the club know that he was a vicious homophobe. Scott Capurro, one of the gayest people I've ever met. Anyway, next on Free Speech Nation, we've got former IDF soldier Eli Lassman, who was informed by King's College London's Israel Society that due to death threats and concerns for his own safety, he could no longer speak on a panel discussing the current war. We're going to be talking about that in just one moment. Please don't go anywhere.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May...
The people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Charity boss and former soldier Eli Lassman was informed by King's College London's Israel Society that due to death threats and concerns for his own safety, he could no longer speak on a panel discussing the current war. Another of the panellists was political activist Kia Willis, and along with Eli, she was also subjected to threats if she were to speak at the university's event. So I'm glad to say that they both join me now, and here in the studio I have Eli. Welcome to the show. So, before I go to Kaya, I want to ask you first about what was the event about and what was going to be said?
So, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. I, as you mentioned, run a charity called Prometheus on campus, and one of the things that we do in terms of our operations is we hold events on different campuses in this country, talking about many different topics, but primarily centered around philosophy. And I was reached by the Israel Society of King's College London to discuss Israel and Palestine in the recent conflict from different perspectives. I myself as a philosopher and a former IDF soldier, and Kaya as a political activist in the United States who now engages in intellectual work surrounding war and specifically the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So it was a discussion of ideas surrounding the conflict.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't a sort of propagandistic or sort of taking a particular stance on anything.
Well, we both have our stances, but it was more of a discussion rather than a talk of us just delivering our particular positions.
And then when did it start to go wrong?
So a few days before the event, we received an email from the King's College London Israel Society informing us that the event has been picked up by several students who have decided that they're going to demonstrate against the talk, and they sent a formal letter to the dean asking the event to be banned. Now, that got picked up by some quite powerful influencers on social media, Twitter and Instagram, and I woke up the next morning, turned my phone on, and found myself subject to hundreds of death threats and calls to jihad and the most hateful, vindictive messages, anti-Semitic filth that you can imagine.
And a lot of this, I understand, came about because you were in the IDF, as all people are conscripted to the IDF in Israel, and they were lying and claiming that you were currently in the IDF.
Well, the interesting thing is that not a single fact that they stated about me was true. They made up that I currently serve in the IDF. They made up that I'm a Zionist. They made up that I just came back from Gaza fighting and committing supposed war crimes.
To give this talk. But in fact, you were in the IDF in, what, 2017, I think?
I hadn't served in about 6 years, yeah.
Right, but they were saying you were currently serving and that this was just a platform for someone committing war atrocities. That's what they were arguing.
Yeah, they made up all these blatant lies about me, and within a few hours it was circulating across all social media. And the problem is that most people who follow, or most people who are interested in these type of accounts, they don't check their facts. So they'll just blindly follow. And if some Twitter influencer says, this is the guy, this is his face, and this is his name, reach out to him and send whatever messages you can.
Well, I'd like to bring in Kaya Willis, who was also scheduled to speak at the event. Hello, Kaya. Thanks for joining us. You're a fellow at the Objective Standard Institute. We've just had a sort of précis of what happened there from Eli. But you also received death threats as a result of your scheduled appearance. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So, yeah, thank you for having me, like Eli said. And yeah, I was also subject